people who copy off of Wikipedia wholesale, and gentlemen, this is a response to a boy using the moniker hotdogwell, or as everyone else calls him, hot dog fail, and I have my buddy Brock here for this one, accompanying me. This clown posted a few comments on my channel months ago and then abruptly quit. I was responding to him on my channel so I could use his comments later, and my replies would serve as a reminder of myself as what I need to look up. I went to his channel sometime later and tried to rekindle the discussion. After a while, Hot Dog Fail accused me of erasing his comments and refused to post on my channel again, forgetting that one comment he put in was right after I logged out, and I approved it the next time. Doesn't matter anyway. I found him on the Y760 Nitro channel, and I'd like to thank Nitro for allowing me to skewer Hot Dog Fail over there. Found him over there sometime later and copied several comments he made on that channel too. You'll find it all at the link underneath the video. I put up several comments he made on my channel, the Nitro channel, and refuted them on my website. Let's begin. The three topics I'm going to focus on right now, and there's a lot more at the link, but one, military and defense spending has been subject to many peaks and valleys over the last 50 years, unlike entitlements and means-tested welfare spending, which has been continually growing in real terms. Welfare and entitlement spending dwarfs defense spending, even with the Iraq War attached. Number two, Obama and Pelosi failed to end the Iraq War as they said they would. Number three, Obamacare is not deficit neutral by any means of the imagination. All right, now going back to number one. If we add up the following items from OMB historical data, table 4.2, percentage distribution of outlays by agency. Here's, if you add up Homeland Security, plus the State Department, plus Veterans Affairs, plus Defense/Military, here are the totals, percentage of the budget. 1962, it was 53%. In 1970, it was 46.3%. 1980, 26.9%, going down. 1990, 26.4%, still going down. 2000, 19.4%, big drop. 2009, 22.9%. So it's less than half of what it was 40 years ago. If we do the same thing with education, federal involvement in education is unconstitutional, is left to the states. But if you add up the Department of Education, Energy, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, plus Social Security Administration, the on and off budget totals, we get the following totals. Again, Energy, Education, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Social Security, here are the totals. 1962, it was 20.9%. 1970, 27.8%. 1980, 36.4%. 1990, 37.8%. 2000, it was 48.7%. 2009 is 45.4%. So today, it is almost twice what those previous totals I gave you were. HHS obviously includes things like the Centers for Disease Control, as well as Medicare spending. Well, I'll break it down differently in just a bit. The total, as I said, the total for the latter group is almost double in the fiscal 2009 budget. If we go to table 8.6, outlays for mandatory and related programs in constant fiscal year 2005 dollars. Medicaid spending has grown in the following fashion. In 1970, it was $11.7 billion. Keep in mind, this is constant dollars. 1980, $30.4 billion. 1990, $57.2. 2000, in the year 2000, it was $131.2 billion. 2009, $230.9 billion. It is growing at an exponential rate. Medicare has grown in the following fashion. 1970, it was $24.2 billion. 1980, $66.6. 1990, it was $229.8. 2000, year 2000, it was $214.2. In year 2009, fiscal year 2009, $393.5. Social Security, following totals. 1970, $127 billion. 1980, $255.1 billion. 1990, $343.1. 2000, $451.3. 2009, $624.2 billion for Social Security. None of the programs have shrunk at all. They continue to grow and grow. Medicaid more than doubled from 1970 to 80 and then continued to nearly double every decade after that. Medicare is growing at a clip of over 50% every decade. Keep in mind, this is before the majority of the baby boomers got out of the system, and look how the cost of these programs have massively increased. Add those totals up for 2009 and fiscal 2005 dollars. We have a total of $1.248 trillion. If we add in other welfare spending such as supplemental security income, plus food and nutrition assistance, plus family and other support assistance to the 2009 totals, we get a grand total of $128.2 billion plus $1.248 trillion, and that equals $1.376 trillion. If I add in the child tax credit, the fiscal year 2009 total becomes $1.398 trillion. There's your entitlement spending, welfare. Now let's turn to table 8.8, outlays for discretionary programs now in fiscal 2005 dollars. Let's see how defense spending has trended. In 1962, it was $389.8 billion. 1970, $465.1. 1980, $331.7. 1990, $462.5. Year 2000, $362 billion. 2009, $576.4. I could add the entire cost of the Iraq War through 2012 to that total, and it still falls short of the total cost of entitlement spending. It comes to $1.385 trillion, which is less than $1.398 trillion. Also notice that defense spending has had many peaks and valleys over the last 48 years. You haven't seen that with entitlements. They continue to grow. Contrast that with defense spending. It was smaller in 80 than it was in 1970, and it was smaller in 2000 than it was in 1990. Keep in mind that's real dollars too. Now if we go to table 11.1, summary comparison of outlays for payments for individuals in fiscal 2005 dollars. Again, summary comparison of outlays for payments to individuals. That's grown from $277.5 billion in 1970 to $1.929 trillion last fiscal year. Randall Hoven made the statement that Obama's failed stimulus, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, is costing more than the Iraq War. The New York Times went to great lengths to discredit him and ended up vindicating him. I'll cut to the chase. The New York Times provided figures for probable war. They adjusted for inflation. The Times provided figures for probable war spending from here out: $43.4 billion in 2011 and $5 to $10 billion in 2012. Add the higher number to our previous totals, and the score becomes $809.4 billion for the Iraq War and $820 billion for the stimulus. And then the Times said, well, it's barely true. That's their way of saying, they were a little upset. As you can see, entitlement and welfare spending blows defense spending out of the water. Entitlements are going to break us. Defense spending won't. Although I'd wager after wars in Iraq and Afghanistan hopefully end in 2012, we can freeze defense spending for 5 years and nobody would die. In fact, we could leave NATO, Europe's able to defend itself, and tell Japan they're capable of defending themselves too. The savings can go towards more development of missile defense. Number 2. So hot dog fail is wrong. Entitlements and means-tested welfare spending blow defense spending in the Iraq War out of the water. No pun intended. Hot dog fail didn't like me pointing out that Pelosi promised to end the war if the Democrats took over Congress in 2007. I've made this point to many libtards, and all I get is stammering or they try to change the subject. Hot dog fail needs a civics lesson. Here's what this little man said. Quote, "Yes, we, the Democrats, had control of Congress technically, but not enough votes to override a veto. Besides, cut the you-know-what. The Republicans started this war way before the Dems were in control. Also, the Dems are about to pull all combat troops out of Iraq by this August. Still, they have to do it responsibly," whatever that means. "If it were up to Republicans, there would be no withdrawal now." No, dummy. Congress holds the power of the purse. All the Democrats had to do was get 51 votes in the Senate, 218 votes in the House. They could have defunded the war any time after Pelosi and her goons took over. Or just use those funds to facilitate a withdrawal. Bush or Obama can't take funds for the Department of Energy and give it to the Department of Labor. It doesn't work that way. Congress controls it. They could have done it. They didn't. Period. And the drawdown in Iraq was inked months before the election. Obama just went along with Bush's plan, so let's throw that out the window. I'm running short on time here, so I'll probably snip this off a little bit. Hotdogwell contended that Obamacare was deficit neutral in its first 10 years, not realizing that most of it doesn't kick in until 2014, but a lot of the taxes are hitting us this year or next, and even in its second 10 years, it won't be deficit neutral either. Won't be in the first 10 years. This is fallacious. First, let's examine the Class Act provision of Obamacare. Is that deficit neutral? Defenders of this new entitlement claim that this is this is nursing home care. Defenders of this new entitlement claim that it will actually improve the federal budget. They cite a report from the CBO that estimates the Class Act would cut the deficit by $72.5 billion over its first 10 years, which is why it was in there. But it takes some charitable math to come up with that figure. The class program will begin collecting premiums in 2011. Excuse me, almost belched. But it won't start paying out benefits until 5 years later. So the $72.5 billion in savings includes 10 years of premiums and only 5 years of benefits. Once the people start claiming benefit checks, the program's finances will deteriorate rapidly. Indeed, the CBO admits that in the decade following 2029, the class program would begin to increase budget deficits by the amounts of tens of billions of dollars for each 10-year period. Because the class program is open to all Americans and because all participants will pay the same premium regardless of whether they're likely to claim benefits or not, only those who foresee needing classes assistance will enroll. The government estimates that just 2% to 6% of Americans will sign up, eligible Americans. As needy individuals require greater and greater payouts, premiums will edge higher to compensate. As the premiums increase, healthier people will leave the insurance pool. This process will repeat until no premium paying customers are left, and then we get a TARP-like bailout. And then I'm going to skip here to Medicare actuary Richard Foster has seen the handwriting on the wall. It knows that the Obamacare is not deficit neutral. Here's a passage, a relevant passage from something in the Wall Street Journal. The trustees do estimate the Medicare hospital fund will run out of money in 2029, some 12 years later than they estimated last year. Keep in mind that the trust fund is a meaningless accounting artifact because Medicare was long ago financed in part by general tax revenues to the tune of over 45% of it. It's also true that, thanks to Obamacare's changes under current budget rules, Medicare's unfunded 75-year liability has fallen to about $30.8 trillion from nearly $37 trillion in the previous audit. Then comes the report's final appendix, where Mr. Foster disowns the previous 280-odd pages. Mr. Foster has been Medicare's chief actuary for 15 years, and as such he is required to evaluate the law as written. But as he notes in his appendix, the law as written bears little, if any, relation to the real world, and thus he says the trustees' estimates do not represent a reasonable expectation for actual program operations, neither the short range or the long range. In an unprecedented move, he directs readers to a separate alternative scenario that his office drew up using more realistic assumptions. Mr. Foster shows that the Medicare cuts that Democrats wrote into Obamacare, over $500 billion worth, exist only on paper and written so they can pretend to reduce the deficit and perform the miracles the trustees dutifully outlined. With the exceptions of cuts in Medicare Advantage, another program hotdogwell apparently likes, but they're cutting that, those reductions will never happen in practice. One of the fictions Mr. Foster highlights is a 30% cut in physician payments over the next 3 years that Democrats have already promised to disallow. And in fact, they did. The House and Senate just patched it. The Democrat-run House and Senate just patched it till the end of November. Under this more plausible outlook, Mr. Foster notes that Medicare's share of the economy will rise 60% between now and 2040. While under the trustees' reports, the Democrats are crowing about it will only rise by 35%. Didn't President Obama tell us the health care reform is entitlement reform, so it's not deficit neutral? No way, Jose. Those Medicare cuts aren't going to happen. We need fundamental reform, or we'll just go bankrupt. If you remember the figures I gave on the growth of entitlement spending, does anyone really believe that the Democrats are going to let these Medicare cuts go through? It's not going to happen, folks. Later on, these cuts will be rescinded along with a doc fix. They'll kick that can down the road. Medicare will continue to grow as it always has. Without fundamental reform of entitlements, we will go broke. You can count on that as sure as you'll be eating out of a dumpster when the bottom really falls out of this economy. Have a nice day. Don't thank me now. Don't forget to check the link below there. Brock, you're done in 2012.